Just over a century ago, the motion camera was invented and changed forever the way we recall our history. For the first time, we could see life through the eyes of ordinary people. Across this series, we'll bring these rare archive films back to life with the help of our vintage mobile cinema. We'll be inviting people with a story to tell to step on board and relive moments they thought were gone forever. They'll see their relatives on screen for the first time, come face to face with their younger selves, and celebrate our amazing 20th century past. This is the people's story, our story. Our vintage mobile cinema was originally commissioned in 1967 to show training films to workers. Today it's been lovingly restored and loaded up with remarkable film footage, preserved for us by the British Film Institute and other national and regional film archives. In this series we'll be travelling to towns and cities across the country and showing films from the 20th century that give us the real history of Britain. Today we're going back to school in the 60s.
A multiplication.
To capture the spirit of secondary modern education.
And each generation, they play the same. A multiplication. That's the name of the game. And each generation.
We're in the Francis Combe Academy in Watford, and we're going to find out whether the 11 plus in the 60s hindered or helped pupils. Coming up, the former pupil who comes face to face with his younger self.
When I look at that pimply, untidy child and think to myself, what am I doing here? I could be outside playing rather than in here.
The TV presenter who fell foul of the 11 plus.
I failed, and it was shock horror.
And I hear what secondary modern schools meant for children.
It was considered to be one of the more pioneering aspects of the education system. We've come to the Francis Combe Academy in Watford because it was this school that was chosen to be the subject of a 1962 film about a day in the life of a secondary modern school. Today it's a thriving comprehensive with over 1,000 pupils, but we're winding the clock back to capture the spirit of secondary modern education. We all have school day memories, but if you were a 10-year-old in the 50s and 60s, one memory might be stronger than most. Your future rested on the outcome of a single IQ exam, the 11 plus. In 1944, the Butler Education Act brought educational reform designed to break down class barriers in England and Wales. Scotland followed in 1945. It made secondary education free and compulsory for all children. The Act also created the 11 plus exam to select pupils for the right school. Passing granted you access to grammar school and university, while those who failed received a vocational education, occasionally at a technical school, but usually at a secondary modern. Supporters of the 11 plus argued it gave working class kids a fairer chance of success. Critics said it meant that failing one exam at 11 doomed you for life.
On Real History, we'll be hearing how this exam affected the lives of all those pupils who sat it. Joining me today are former pupils from the 60s who've come from all over the country to tell me about their experience of secondary school life in those days. Many of them will be seeing our films for the very first time, and some will be watching themselves on our silver screen. Marylyn Mason has travelled here today from Lincolnshire. She was among 3 out of 4 pupils to fail the 11 plus in the 1960s. But that didn't stop her from carving out a successful career in television. She was the face of Calendar TV in Yorkshire and co-presented a regional programme with Richard Whiteley for nearly 20 years. Now, you failed to pass your scholarship.
I did.
And everything about that sentence is wrong, because I use the word failed, which people don't use nowadays. You felt that you'd failed, didn't you?
Oh, yes, because all through primary school, all through junior school, I'd always been in the top 3. So there was never any doubt that I was going to pass my scholarship and go to grammar school. When I failed, and it was shock horror.
Did you enjoy being at the secondary modern school?
Oh, yes, it was a brilliant secondary school. I had a marvellous headmaster, because when I went there, he said, you're better being a big fish in a small pool than a small fish in a big pool. And I thought, oh, yeah, OK, you know, because, you know, the people who'd gone onto the grammar school, they thought they were the elite, you know, and so they had everything in front of them. And my father actually said to me, but this will make you fight harder and you will work harder to achieve more in life. And I suppose I did in a way.
Today, we're taking this former TV presenter back to her school days. What memories will these films evoke for Marylyn?
I thought I was back there. It was absolutely amazing. I mean, I knew that we were going to see film from the 60s, but you actually see yourself. I mean, it is so typical and so true that you think, oh, that could have been me, yes, and the school. The school looked exactly like my school, so, yes, amazing. Transports you right back there.
Marylyn sat her 11 plus in 1958. Her mother was a teacher, so there were high expectations.
My mother was absolutely devastated. It was just the end of the world. I mean, it really was. You know, it had shamed her in front of the family. You know, I'd let her down. I mean, she was so upset. I cannot tell you how upset she was. And it was awful. And she blamed my father for moving his job so that I had to move schools.
The 11 plus tested pupils in 3 areas: writing, arithmetic, and general problem solving. Many critics believed the exam was elitist and put young children under too much stress, according to this BBC Panorama programme.
Mummy and Daddy want me to pass, really.
Yes?
Daddy said if I don't, I'll get a thick ear.
Oh, did he?
Yes.
You frightened of that?
No.
I'm sure he didn't mean it, really.
No.
What school do you want to go to?
Marylyn thrived at her secondary modern, Ribberton Hall in Preston, and passed 8 O-levels. But the stigma of failing her 11 plus was difficult to shake off.
You do feel a failure. I mean, I'd felt a real failure throughout my time at secondary school, because you think, well, you didn't make it and the people at the grammar school are the clever people. I felt I had a lot to achieve. I had to prove myself, so I did work hard at school.
Secondary modern schools didn't have sixth forms, so Marylyn's headmaster helped her transfer to nearby Chorley Grammar School to take her A-levels. She later became deputy head girl.
I still found it very daunting, thinking, oh, going to a grammar school, how am I going to manage at A-level with all these clever grammar school people? But actually I fitted in very well and found that I was just as good as they were. And I really enjoyed my time there, and there were some good teachers there. I think had I always gone to the grammar school, I probably would have inevitably gone to university.
And like many other former secondary school pupils, Marylyn went on to achieve success.
Because I felt I'd let my mother down so badly, I had to prove that I could achieve things in life, and I suppose my A-levels were the next big thing, and I did it. So I felt I'd achieved something, made amends.
My next guest also failed the 11 plus. 58-year-old Barbara Lee from Twickenham suffered all her life from a lack of confidence and low self-esteem. She believes that being told she wasn't good enough at such a young age had a long-term effect.
I think it's the word failure that sticks in your mind,
Yes, it
isn't
is.
it? It's not, you know, it's the word, isn't it?
Barbara came from a traditional background in Hendon and was expected to raise a family rather than have a career.
This is a diary from 1963 and all the things we did when we were younger.
I think we better keep that. We've had enough of that in the newspapers, really. I think we'll just keep that.
We're going to transport Barbara back to the days when she was an 11-year-old schoolgirl. Will this BBC documentary called The Schools, made in 1962, about secondary modern education, bring back difficult memories?
Well, now, Janet, you're 11 years of age now, aren't you? And therefore you've left the primary school and you've come to the secondary school.
What sort of education?
It shows an 11-year-old girl in the headmaster's office of her new secondary modern.
Yes, we were rather sorry Janet failed the 11 plus.
Well, I hardly think that failed is the right word, Mrs. Kitchen.
When that teacher mentioned to that girl about failing the 11 plus, that really kind of got a weakness in me as well, because obviously that's what I did. I failed the 11 plus.
You see, what happened was that Janet took a test so that we could find out exactly which school would suit her best.
You were pigeonholed at that age because they saw you as having that ability probably for the rest of your life.
She would have failed the test had she been selected for the wrong school. And therefore, if she's been selected for the right school, then she's really passed the test.
You know, that is quite damaging for children to think that at that age that is going to be, you know, them for the rest of their life.
Barbara remembers how the two sexes were typecast. The boys got metalwork and woodwork, while the girls were steered towards typing and cooking.
You were doing things like domestic science and things that, if you went to grammar school, you might have been doing another language or literature or more academic subjects. So you were very much put in that kind of womanly subject area. For us, it was either be a secretary or to go teachers' training college if you got the right qualifications. But really, it was a stopgap before you're getting married and before having a family.
But at 22, Barbara embarked on 7 years of night school. She obtained a degree in social science, and today she is an adult education lecturer.
By the most modern methods in the world.
How many quarters do we need to make a whole one?
I haven't gone round in my life saying I failed the 11 plus, but I think the word failure carries such a powerful message that if you get that message when you're younger, it's very difficult to shake it off, whatever you do, as you mature.
So what was the thinking behind an education system that gave many children like Barbara a sense of failure? The Francis Combe Academy here in Watford was one of the new secondary modern schools built to accommodate the 75% of children who failed their 11 plus every year. And I'm off to the woodwork room to find out more from educational historian Cathy Burke.
So what did the 11 plus do?
In shorthand terms, it sorted children. It sorted them. Whether it tested or measured their intelligence is subject to debate, and it was a fierce debate that occurred in the 1950s. But it effectively sorted children so that they could be slotted in and that it would fit them then on a route for life in general.
The secondary modern schools that sprung up in the 1950s were light, airy and modern in design, and, freed from the constraints of having to prepare children for exams, teachers could afford to be experimental.
teachers would have the freedom to experiment and to teach the way they wanted to, design an education within an atmosphere of freedom. And that was quite a progressive idea, really.
Words. Snap. Not bad. Let's put snap down, shall we?
And so for the first 10 years, I guess, the secondary modern school was considered to be one of the more pioneering aspects of the education system.
Kathy herself remembers passing her 11 plus, but it's a memory full of trepidation.
I was acutely aware that there was a chance of failing or passing, and if you passed, you were somehow safe. I knew the physical space I was going to. I could see the school I was going to over the road, the grammar school. Those who failed, who went to the modern school, they seemed to go into a kind of abyss. You know, you never saw them again. I was aware of that, and we were all told that this was the most important thing in our lives.
Initially, secondary moderns weren't expected to offer O-levels, and pupils received a school leaving certificate instead. But as the 50s marched on, teachers started to realise their pupils were capable of more.
Some teachers started to put children through examinations in these schools, and they passed. Lo and behold, they passed. So this really was a crisis for the idea of the modern school, which was to avoid those sorts of things. And it seemed to be not so distinctly different from the lower end of the grammar school.
By 1963, 1 in 10 secondary modern pupils were sitting O-levels, and some got very good results. The writing was on the wall for the two-tier educational system.
Don't throw them, Brenda, that's a good girl.
On Real History Today, we're at the Francis Combe Academy at Watford to hear some remarkable stories of how the 11 plus exam affected the lives of children who sat it in the 1960s. This school was thrust into the limelight in 1962 when it was featured in a documentary about a day in the life of a secondary modern. Paid for by the National Union of Teachers, the aim was to show parents what goes on during an ordinary school day.
And the glory forever and ever. Amen.
Today we've organised a school reunion for former pupils who appeared in the film nearly 40 years ago and invited along the filmmaker, 87-year-old John Krish.
Did you have a sense that the people at this school felt that they'd failed because they'd not passed their 11 plus?
Not for one moment. Not for one moment. I felt that they were at home, and they were pleased to be here, and they were succeeding.
63-year-old Bernie Batchelor from Watford was one of the stars of John's film. Bernie was the class clown. He left school without being able to read or write.
Did you feel you were well taught and well looked after at this school?
From my perspective, in the early days at the school, not really. I still left school not being able to read and write properly. And I really never got round to reading and writing properly until I started long-distance lorry driving. And I had to read the place names and the road signs to get where I was going and look at the maps. So I actually feel as I learnt quite a lot in the life skills, shall we say, having left school.
Someone else who starred in the film was Yvonne Shaw from London. She suffered from dyslexia and was a bit of a rebel during her time at Francis Combe.
Did you enjoy it here?
It was an experience. Also, coming from any infant school, junior school, to a big school like this, and although it's big now, it was big then, was a big sort of cultural change, big shock. So all the company was great, the school clubs were great. But again, any big authority, anything you have to deal with, students have to rebel against. I was quite rebellious.
Now they're all about to step on board and travel back in time to 1962 and come face to face with their younger selves. The documentary featuring Bernie and Yvonne and the others is called Our School. It's a fascinating record of teaching stars in post-war Britain and was shown on the BBC to millions of viewers in the 1960s.
Come on, get a move on. Right, sit down and get your homework out.
All right, fine.
Yvonne, now a medical therapist, has never seen the film before. How will she feel now, watching her 15-year-old self?
Quickly give those out, will you?
When the solution is pumped in, we pick up current through this brush gear and we transfer it onto the copper cylinder, which is revolving in the solution.
We can set up a similar arrangement to this in the lab at school.
It was like being back at school. You could remember actually physically being there and doing it. So I found it quite moving to see that and then see the people around me.
Yvonne appeared when the film followed her class on a school trip to a local paper mill.
I think the school represented a place of change. I think seeing very young beings, which I was, it just reminds you so much of those sort of tender feelings which you forget. And it was just nice to see them again. And just remembering who you were and who one is now. It makes one feel bigger, more complete. Brings your childhood back.
Yvonne passed 11 O-levels at 16, but until 1972, secondary modern pupils could leave school at 15 without taking any exams, and many of them were girls.
Now stop talking. Who made the decision that you leave school at 15?
I did.
You, Mum? Well, now, Susan.
Well, my mum and dad asked me what I wanted to do, and I said I wanted to leave, so I said, it's up to you.
On the word go, up and down the wall bars twice, 2 backward rolls, touch each of the 4 walls. Ready, go!
It's inexplicable, coming back into a physical place where you can almost feel the history. I don't know. It's something that would take me a while to think about.
You seem to be finding some difficulty in speaking, Keith. What were you eating?
Chewing gum, sir.
Well, you kind of remove it. And don't stick it under the table.
The making of this documentary left an indelible mark on Yvonne's memory.
It was the outside world coming in. There weren't very many instances of being valued, and that was someone coming in and valuing pupils in school. So it was exciting.
For Bernie, schoolwork was something of a necessary evil. What classroom memories does he have of the film being made?
I can remember the film taking place. There's one section there that we're walking along the corridor with my mate Terry. It was a great time, like, you know, we got out of some lessons, but I don't think our lessons were disrupted that much. I think we actually found it all as an interesting thing. We didn't realise, really, that we were being filmed. Well, at least that's my memory of it anyway. It just was done so well and so natural that it just became part of what we were doing every day.
Now look, this is the sort of scene you might have found when you first went into London in medieval times.
My part was in the classroom. I had several classroom lessons there, and one of them was where I had to spell the word people. And I think I got it wrong at first attempt, but I think I got it right in the film in the end. And I've never really forgot how to spell it now.
Now, Bernard, tell them how to spell people.
P-E-O-P-L-E.
Yes, you learned it from the last time I told you. Too many of you spell people with P-E-E-P-L-E. Not necessary. Right.
Bernie had trouble reading and writing and was placed in the bottom stream with Mrs. Peacock. But he enjoyed school and got a reputation as the funny one.
When I look at that pimply, untidy child going through a spelling test and think to myself, what am I doing here? I could be outside playing rather than in here.
Bernie loved the practical skills he was taught at school.
I remember going into the metalwork lessons. They were good, nice lessons where you could get to grips with some materials and that, and I always felt that I wasn't great in academic, but I always liked practical things. I liked engineering, machinery.
Don't be afraid of the spot.
Bernie left Francis Combe without any qualifications, but he didn't let it hinder him in life. He went on to manage a logistics company and is now a successful driving instructor.
I think you could have done a little more than this by now. Yes, sir. Well, I did this part wrong, sir, so I had to wrap it up and do it again.
I've got happy memories. I enjoyed myself at school. Yeah, I must say I enjoy myself. My worst memory really is the fact that I didn't do as well as perhaps I could have done academically. Although I didn't leave really being able to spell and read properly, I did have the ways and means to learn it later on.
Wait a minute, take a breath, don't rush it, say it properly. What do you think they might be selling?
Well, they might sell, let's say, some banjos.
Well,
they do sell banjos. The old magicians would go round and round.
A sort of banjo that they used in the Middle Ages, all right.
When the documentary was shown on BBC television, for a short time, Bernard became a bit of a celebrity.
For a little while I was a film star. For about a month, people kept spotting you and noticing you and talking to you, you know, because it was a good thing in those days.
The man who made Bernie a star, John Krish, hasn't watched his film for many years. What memories does he have of making it?
My job was to bring back the atmosphere of the school on film.
You said relax like. Why like?
Don't know, it just came out.
Before I started shooting, I came to the school every day for 6 weeks and sat in every classroom, and in that time decided on which teachers I would use and which pupils I would use.
What do you feel about this business of speaking well?
John made his film look like what we now call fly-on-the-wall documentary, but in fact he spent days carefully constructing every scene.
I turn each classroom into a studio. Nothing is snatched, everything is rehearsed. If there's a spontaneous moment which we have caught, then we have caught it, of course.
I think speech is just like a quicksand. It just drags down, it doesn't push up.
It's a good analogy. And if any of you people don't know the meaning of this word analogy, you know what to do. Look it up in a dictionary.
The spirit of this school is what I set out to capture.
By 1963, with 1 in 10 secondary modern students obtaining O-levels, the idea of dividing young people up using the 11+ exam started to fall from favour. 2 years later, in 1965, the government announced plans to switch to the non-selective comprehensive system of secondary education. And selective education was finally abolished in 1976. The 11+ exam still exists in a very few education authorities, but for most of us, it's passed into history.
Everybody I've spoken to really liked the secondary modern schools they went to. They liked the teachers, they liked the lessons, they liked the learning processes, they got a great deal out of it. But almost everyone felt that they'd failed by not passing this 11+ test.
Which is why today I'm delighted we've been able to mark their considerable achievements and add their stories to the National Archive. Next time on Real History, we're on Horse Guards Parade in London. To recall the Queen's coronation in 1953, the first royal event live on television.
Everybody was wearing their best clothes. We were in the presence of the Queen.
Relics from the Bronze and Iron Age, digging for Britain at 9 here on BBC Two. All right, now on BBC Three, if you missed it last weekend, it's Doctor Who.